Good singing this morning, friends. And good dancing on the Circle Round for Freedom, which I never really thought of as a dance tune, so thanks for opening that up, Adam and Baker and all. Becoming a people. The times they are changing. Many of us, maybe a few of us at least, didn't even know that song until a movie came out pretty recently, right? And somebody I paid a lot of money to sing really badly, right? Some of us know that song from when it was written. Others of us learned it later on in our lives, and maybe we sang it petulantly when we threw ourselves on our bed and slammed the door at our parents who just couldn't get it. I don't know who I'm referring to, but someone. What we might not understand, what we might not realize, we lose the context of things so quickly, but that song was written by Bob Dylan just 2 months after the March on Washington, in which Dr. King gave the I Have a Dream speech. Context matters. So we're here again to talk about equity, which just goodness knows can sound so heady. It can sound all about policy, right? And so we started our service with the Time for All Ages talking about welcome, which is a part of equity, right? And then last week, what we shared with our kids was equity and equality are different, right? So many of us have seen this, equality, right? 3 kids trying to see over a fence to watch a ball game. And so then we understand that maybe equality isn't all there is. And so we start to talk about equity because we realize the tall one can see the ball game anyway, doesn't need a box at all. And the mid-size, I do use car terms to speak about children sometimes, the mid-size model is served by having 1 box underneath them, right? But the compact model, the sort of square pants unit, needs 2 to see over the fence. And I'm really grateful that this is coming into our consciousness, that we're starting to realize that what works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. That we actually need to be conscious of what it is that people need. Right? We learned last week from our Time for All Ages, Oliver the octopus said, equal treatment does not fix things for everyone. Some games remain unwinnable. Do we remember that? Right? And yet, equality is mostly what we're taught. Fair is fair, even Steven, all the things. Equality tends to be actually about measuring and counting, and it narrows our gaze. That's why when our ministry team was wrestling with equity, we realized that it's not just about making it even. It is about the practice of becoming a people. That is, being a part of a people, not staying at the center, and deciding from that vantage point what's fair based on our knowledge and experience, but actually interacting with others, with holding a larger view, with rooting ourselves in our theological knowing that we are all in this together, and if someone needed something more or different, giving it to them would not be a loss to any of us. It was foundationally a rejection of a zero-sum game. Equity means that we interact with each other so that all games are winnable for everybody. That is, so that living in the world works for everybody. Now, admittedly, this might seem like a flight of fancy just now. How do we dare to even imagine that might even be a possibility amidst the news of these days? That is a fair question. To become a people, after all, is decidedly countercultural. That's not just true in this time, but also in any time we have ever known. Across generations and geographies, personal identities, and party affiliation, there is a tendency among us to speak as if the issues of our day are uniquely bad, the worst ever. And yet, if we slow down, if we look back, we recognize that there have been pronounced periods of injustice throughout human history. Think of any war, slavery, the Holocaust, any genocide, any hate crime, any misogyny. Oh, there's plenty of all of it to pick from, friends, sadly. In other words, the hardships of our time are not unique, and human frailties are in the midst of them now and have been in the midst of all previous challenges, previous injustices. And yet, if we look closely at any of it, we not only find a disregard for equality, but also within it, we find a concentrated few, and among them a dedicated quest for power and money that is generally sourced in fear and brokenness. Now, it isn't always easy to sense the fear at the root. Yet I deeply believe it is there. It is there. There is some brokenness from which someone didn't heal, some fear that they lived with, some core not enoughness. And our human psyches do what they do. They have us thinking that we can control things. They have us centering our own needs and our own nerve endings. They have us belittling others, using power over all the rest so that we can feel like we at last have power and agency. That's human. On occasion, though, injustice is stemmed. The tide turns, and when it does, there is something else that is revealed. We find someone in that reveal. We find someone, or more likely a group of someones, who are healthy enough. That is to say, whole enough, not perfect, but healed enough to set aside their own self-interest and show up in the service of a larger wholeness, a greater possibility, who practiced into what it might mean to be a people, who took a risk to treat another as that other would want to be treated, the platinum rule. Now, many of us learned the golden rule, treat others as we would want to be treated. But fortunately, greater wisdom has come to light. The platinum rule, treat others as they would like to be treated. The platinum rule centers another as well as invites attention, intention, and conversation, all of which are at the heart of equity. For me, there are two examples. There are many that come to mind, but two that I'll share today. One is from the Hebrew Bible, another from a prose poem rooted in the lived experience of a poet. One centers systemic injustice, the other a personal distress. In one, power is confronted and genocide is interrupted. In the other, a bridge is built. In both, the practice of becoming a people is deployed. In both, there is an experience of what it might mean to be a people. I will start with the Hebrew Bible because I know you all get anxious to hear from the Bible regularly, and so here we go. Oh, thank you. The story comes from the book of Esther, in which, now you stretch yourself, in the book of Esther, there is an indulgent, narcissistic king. I don't make this stuff up. King Ahasuerus. He is rich and powerful. He's rash and he's reckless, and he relies heavily on an inner circle driven, as Rabbi Sharon Brous puts it, by their own selfish and sinister motives. Do tell. the book begins with the king celebrating a feast. It's a major feast that goes on for 180 days. With his circle of power, there is food and drink, everything to excess. The king was showing off, and in the midst of that showing off, he summons his wife to come to this fest and this feast, and he orders her in front of everyone to dance naked in front of the guests. Somehow, I want you to just imagine how extraordinary this is. Somehow, she garners the courage to stand up for herself and her own dignity and says no. Now, no one, let alone a woman, dared to refuse the king anything. She was banished from the kingdom and never heard from again. So what does a narcissist king do when he's down one queen and has banished her? He gets another queen. And these were the days you didn't swipe left or right. You just, if you were the king, you held a beauty pageant. So everyone was competing to be the new queen. Esther was shoved into the mix. And Esther, you see, was raised. She was a Jew, and she was raised by her uncle Mordecai. And they all knew the kingdom was rampant with anti-Semitism. And so Mordecai said to her, be sure, just keep it a secret. Tell no one that you are a Jew. And she did. She kept it a secret. Meanwhile, and most biblical stories require that word, I'm just going to tell you. Meanwhile, under the king's leadership, one advisor, Haman, had been granted extraordinary power and privilege in the king's court. This is a man with, as what one scholar writes, quote, a bottomless need to punish those whom he perceives as having not shown appropriate obsequiousness. That's your $20 word for today. But one day, Mordecai fails to bow to Haman as the royal decree demands. And you can imagine Haman is furious, and he wants revenge on all of the Jews. Why? Well, Rabbi Sharon Brous reminds us, because this is how racism works. We are never slighted by one. We attribute it to all. And the result was nearly catastrophic. You see, Haman persuaded the king to issue a decree ordering the destruction of all the Jews in the kingdom on a soon date. Mordecai gets wind of this somehow, and he goes to Esther and tells her, you must confront the king and inform him of Haman's plans. Tell him you're Jewish and that he needs to spare the Jews. Well, Esther knows what happened to her predecessor. Esther is, shall we say, reluctant. No one confronts the king and survives. No one. She is not even allowed to see the king unless she is summoned. She fears for her very life. And yet, Uncle Mordecai is persistent. He says, if you are silent and you do nothing at this time, somebody else will save the Jewish people. Remarkable faith that they will survive. But he says, but who knows? Who knows? Was it not for just this moment that you were made queen? You have access to the king in this royal place. Perhaps it is that you were meant for just such a time as this. Perhaps it is you were meant for just such a time as this. Esther ends up agreeing, and she essentially dupes the king. She invites him to a feast, to a celebration, shows him a lovely time, says, bring Haman. We'll have a great time. The king accepts. Haman is thrilled, right? It proves that he's really climbing into the center of power here. But at the second feast, Esther says to the king, I am Jewish. And your advisor here is trying to destroy all of my people. The king was moved, and he ordered not only the Jewish people to be spared, but that Haman would be hanged. Now, why do I tell this story? One is to tell you that one person is often seen as a symbolic reference point. When you are a minority group, this is not new. And one person is blamed for everything. Two, Esther didn't want to do any of this. She maybe didn't love the king. This maybe wasn't like her greatest thing that she could have hoped for, but she lived a comfortable life and a way better life than most of the women she had ever known or met. She had everything. She didn't have to have that much to do with him, and while her life was not her own per se, it was the life she knew. It was the life she knew. She did not want to do the hard thing. She did not want to die. She did not want to be banished. And it was and it is completely understandable that she thought she had no power. And then along comes Uncle. Who knows? Who knows? Perhaps it is just for this reason that you were chosen. For such a time as this, your particular gift is exactly what is needed. Last but not least, we can agree certainly that anti-Semitism, racism, hatred of any particular group is bad. We can stand against it. We can say, we can point to Haman as the evil character. We just need to stamp out the ones with their open hatred. We can think all of that stuff, but listen to the story. Listen in your mind's ear. Pay attention. Haman's hatred wasn't actually enough. Haman's hatred wasn't enough. He needed the unspoken hatred of the king and the community so that his wish would become the decree. He needed the things that we sometimes refer to as benign neglect. The things we let pass when we hear people say, some of my best friends are. The things we let pass when sentences begin, it's just that they. You see, Haman's hatred had to connect with the power of others, content with scapegoating, content with passively being willing to go along with how it is versus living into a different vision. See, we may be quick to assume that the one hard thing we are being asked to do won't be enough, but we don't know that. We may presume that not going along with hatred, finding the problem only to be with the active and unspoken haters is enough, but it isn't. We cannot surrender our vision of a world made whole by love because it is the only thing that will make the world whole. I turn now to the story told in the prose poem Gate A4, written by Palestinian-American poet Naomi Shihab. In it, Nye tells the story of being in the Albuquerque airport and learning that her flight had been delayed for hours. She was doing what any of us do when we get that information. She's walking around, whiling around away her time, when her thoughts are interrupted by an announcement over the loudspeaker. If anyone, it says, if anyone in the vicinity of gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Now, as I said, Nye is a Palestinian American, but this was just the years right after 9/11. And one paused back then. One still pauses right now if one is an Arab American. She paused, but it was her gate, and so she went. And what she found there at the gate was an older woman in full Palestinian embroidered dress on the floor, sobbing, wailing. The flight attendants, or the flight agents rather, were desperate. "We don't know what's wrong," they said to her. "We announced the flight was delayed, and she's been like this ever since, on the floor, crying." Naomi goes to the woman and speaks just a few Arabic words poorly, and the woman suddenly stops crying. She was due in El Paso for major medical treatment, and she thought that the flight had been canceled. Well, Nye found out that her son was going to be picking her up in El Paso, and so she said, "Let's call your son and let him know." And Nye explained in English what had happened and that she would stay with his mom throughout the flight. And then she said, "Let's call your other son." So they called the other sons, and then Nye said, "Well, let's call my Palestinian father so you can speak Arabic." And so she called her dad, and the two spoke in Arabic to each other, and of course they learned that they knew 10 of the same people. And then Naomi thought, well, let's see, I'm a Palestinian-American poet. I know other Palestinian-American poets. Let me call some other poets. Well, by this time, 2 hours had passed. And the woman was laughing and telling stories, answering questions, and then she pulled out a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts from her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To everyone's amazement, no single woman declined, and you know how we are. "Oh no, I couldn't. Oh, I don't eat sugar. My teeth, all the things." But everyone took a cookie. It was like a sacrament, said Nye. Everyone covered in powdered sugar and smiling. And then, let's stretch ourselves, friends, and then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers. I know. And 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered in powdered sugar too. Here is Nye's conclusion to that poem. "And I looked around the gate. I looked around the gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in. This is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in that gate." Once the crying of confusion stopped, not a single person in that gate seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug everyone. "This," she said, "this can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost." You see, when we get beyond what we know, when we engage our curiosity, when we imagine that we just might be with all of our uncertainty, our frailties, and our meager offerings, we just might be made for such a time as this. When we tend to the stories, our own and those around us, that remind us of times when we were a people living in a shared world, actually living together in a shared world covered in powdered sugar and awkwardness. When we feel the fear and go forward anyway, remembering, as Michelle Obama put in her book, The Light We Carry, our hurts become our fears become our limits. For many of us, this can be a heavy inheritance carried by generations. It's a lot to try to push back against and to try to unlearn. But one light feeds another. One strong family lends strength to more. One engaged community can ignite those around us. This is the power of the light we carry. When we pay attention and set our intentions toward becoming a people, toward living in a world in which all of us can thrive, we realize we still can be. It still can happen. Not everything is lost. Not everything is lost. Not everything is lost. So may it be.